Family laughed when I walked into the wedding alone, but a stranger walked in. They froze. That sentence sounds like something from a bad rom-com. Right, but I lived it. Every glance, every smirk, every whispered comment that afternoon felt like a tiny needle under my skin. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I stood there, clutching the strap of my purse like it could anchor me in place. Then the doors opened, and a man I'd never seen before walked in, looked directly at me, and said something that shattered the entire room's smug silence. But before I tell you what he said, let me take you back to where it all began, because trust me, it didn't start at the wedding. It started long before that with the people who were supposed to love me most. My name is Mariah Carey, not the one with the voice or the gowns, just Mariah Carey from Seattle. I'm 35 years old, single, childless, and, apparently, a family embarrassment. I work as a senior creative strategist at a boutique media firm in downtown Seattle, a place where I've helped brands go viral and campaigns win awards. You'd think that'd count for something, but in the Harper family, success only comes in certain packages: wife, mother, loyal partner, preferably with a Pinterest-worthy home and a Christmas card filled with matching pajamas. That was my younger sister, Savannah, blonde, soft-spoken, trained in early childhood education, married to her college sweetheart, the type of woman who hosted charcuterie board nights and posted ultrasound photos framed in watercolor, the type of woman my parents told me I should try to be more like. I tried once. It didn't go well. I was still dating Devin at the time, Devin Laird, tech consultant, good dresser, confident in that way some men are when they've never had to work for approval. He liked that I was ambitious. At first, said it was sexy, until my job started asking more of me than he liked. He wanted dinner at 6. I wanted to finish storyboards. He wanted weekends at his parents' lake house. I wanted to pitch a rebrand for a nonprofit client, saving Black-owned bookstores from closure. He said I was choosing work over love. I said he was choosing control over respect. We ended quietly, no plates thrown, just two people on opposite ends of a value system neither of us could bend. 3 months later, I received Savannah's wedding invitation. Thick envelope, cream cardstock, gold foil lettering. It was beautiful. I stared at my name written in perfect script, Ms. Mariah Carey, +1, a tiny line that might as well have been a punch to the throat. I set the envelope down and stared at the ceiling. I had no one to bring, not anyone I'd feel proud of introducing to the people who measured your worth by the ring on your finger and the approval of your dinner companion. I told myself it didn't matter. I'd go alone, head high, dress sharp, smile tight. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't chip at something deep in me. Calls from my mother started soon after. Savannah's asked if you'll be doing a toast. She said one evening while I was folding laundry, "Of course, it'll be short. Keep it light. Nothing too modern. You know how traditional Tyler's parents are." I told her I wasn't planning to speak. There was a pause. "Oh, well, just don't be late, sweetheart. And remember, everyone's bringing someone." Everyone. That word did laps in my head for the next 3 weeks. I considered asking Stella, my best friend, to come as my date, but she had a client photo shoot in New York. I thought briefly about texting Devin, just for show, just for one night. I closed the thought before it could finish forming. I even considered hiring someone, a paid companion, just to smile, nod, and wear a suit. Grace, my coworker, joked that she knew a guy who did exactly that. "You'd be surprised how many women hire him just to survive Christmas dinner," she said. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. I bought my dress alone. Deep navy, clean lines, low back, fitted just right. The salesgirl told me it was elegant, sophisticated. I nodded. It didn't matter. I could have walked in wearing the Met Gala's finest, and they still would have seen me as incomplete. The day before the wedding, I drove to the hotel alone. I checked into a room with one key card and unpacked in silence. The room was nice white linens, soft lighting, but the quiet was deafening. I watched Savannah's Instagram story that night. A group of bridesmaids in silk robes, sipping champagne, laughing in a kitchen that looked pulled from a lifestyle magazine. I wasn't in any of them. I hadn't been asked. When I brought it up weeks ago, Savannah said, "You'd feel awkward with my friends. You don't really know them, and the dresses aren't exactly your style." I swallowed that comment like a sour pill. It sat heavy in my chest. The morning of the wedding, I got ready slowly, hair curled, lips a dark wine, heels polished. I looked in the mirror and told myself I looked powerful, but beneath it, I felt like a prop, a reminder of what happens when a woman doesn't follow the script. I drove to the venue in silence. The church was beautiful, the kind featured in bridal blogs, ivy on brick, wooden pews. The parking lot was full, couples everywhere, hands held, laughter shared. I waited in my car for 5 minutes, pretending to check my phone. Just one day, I told myself, get through one day. I stepped into the church, and it was like the air changed. Heads turned, whispers flickered. Aunt Teresa did a once-over and offered a tight smile. "Mariah, how modern you look. Is your date parking the car?" I said nothing, just walked forward. I felt the burn behind my ears, that familiar sting of being assessed and dismissed all at once. The Harper family had a way of smiling while slicing you open. At the reception, it was worse. My name card sat at the end of a long table, surrounded by cousins and distant relatives. No +1 beside me. My mother approached with a strange urgency in her step. "Did your guest get delayed?" she asked, eyes scanning the room like searching for an answer that wouldn't embarrass her. I shook my head. "There's no guest." She blinked once. "Oh, well, there's still time to mingle." Her voice cracked at the edge of politeness. Then Savannah took the mic. She was radiant, in the way brides are when everything's gone exactly to plan. "Thank you all for being here," she said, her voice sweet and rehearsed. "It means the world to have each of you witness this day with us, even those of us who came solo." Her eyes found mine, her smile twisted. Just enough. The room laughed. The laughter grew. I smiled, that tight, burning kind of smile. My fingers clenched around the stem of my glass. I was about to stand, to leave, to disappear into a restroom stall and breathe into a paper towel. Then the doors opened, and someone stepped in. Tall, clean-cut, charcoal suit. He looked straight at me and said 7 words I'll never forget. "You ready for what happened next?" He didn't hesitate, just walked toward me like we'd known each other forever, like he belonged beside me. His voice was low but deliberate, and it sliced clean through the noise. "Sorry I'm late. Love." 7 words, simple, precise, devastating in their effect. Heads turned, mouths paused mid-laughter, and for the first time that day, the room went quiet, the kind of quiet you only hear at funerals or after someone said something that doesn't fit the narrative. He stepped next to me, placed a hand gently on the small of my back, and leaned in just enough that it looked natural. "Traffic," he added in a stage whisper, total nightmare. But I made it. I should have said something, anything, but I just stared. He smiled, cool and calm, like this was all part of a plan, and then, with effortless grace, he turned to the nearest table. "Sebastian. By the way, I'm with Mariah." He extended a hand to no one in particular, but everyone close enough leaned forward, drawn by the strange magic of someone who didn't flinch, not even under a dozen sets of judgmental eyes. The name hit me like a faint memory. I had no idea who he was. He was tall, dark-haired, well-dressed in a suit that didn't come off the rack. His smile was warm, but his eyes were watchful, like he was scanning the scene for signs of danger. My mother arrived at our side within seconds. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You must be—" She trailed off, clearly expecting me to fill in the blank. "Sebastian," I said finally. Finding my voice, "This is my mom, Eleanor." Sebastian didn't miss a beat. "Mrs. Harper," he said with a slight bow of the head. "Mariah's told me so much about you." That lie was so smooth I almost believed it myself. My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, but she forced a smile. "I wish we'd known you were coming," she said. "We could have adjusted the seating. Last-minute decision," Sebastian replied. "I wrapped a client meeting just in time. Couldn't let Mariah walk into this alone." He glanced at me then, and something about the way he looked at me like I was someone worth protecting made something shift in my chest. We walked together toward the bar. "Okay," I said under my breath. "Who are you?" He kept his eyes ahead, smiling slightly. "Sebastian, photographer's assistant, wedding next door. I saw what was happening and couldn't just stand there. So you decided to crash this one technically," he said. I crossed a hallway. "There's a difference. You don't even know me. Didn't have to. I saw your face when she made that joke. I've seen that look before." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. We reached the bar. "Vodka soda," he guessed. "Close," I said. "Gin and tonic." He ordered both. The rest of the evening unfolded like a scene from a movie I didn't know I'd agreed to star in. Sebastian played the part so convincingly, I had to remind myself it wasn't real. He remembered names I barely whispered, asked questions like he genuinely cared, and dropped subtle compliments about my work like we'd been dating for months. When someone asked how we met, he launched into a story about a gallery opening I supposedly designed for. Her concepts were so bold, he said. It was like walking through someone's mind. He even described a sculpture that sounded vaguely like one I'd mocked up for a client 2 years ago. It was surreal. I watched my family's perception shift in real time. Suddenly, I wasn't the pathetic older sister anymore. I was the woman who'd attracted a charming, successful man. Savannah, of course, wasn't buying any of it. She watched from across the room with the kind of narrowed suspicion only a younger sibling could perfect. She cornered me in the hallway between the bathrooms and the reception hall. "So," she said, arms crossed, lips tight, "Sebastian." I nodded. "That's his name. Funny," she said. "You never mentioned him. Not once." "We've been keeping things private," I replied, echoing Sebastian's earlier line. "Not everyone lives their life on Instagram." Her eyes narrowed. "He doesn't seem like your type. That's because you've never actually asked me what my type is," I said, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. Savannah blinked. "Don't mess this up for me," she snapped quietly. "This is my day." "Then maybe stop making it about me," I said, and walked away before she could retort. Back at the table, Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay, family drama?" I said, "You're right in the thick of it now." "Good," he said. "Wouldn't want to miss the full experience." I laughed, a short, unexpected sound. It felt like oxygen. The music started up again, and he leaned close. "Dance." I hesitated. The floor was full of couples, the kind that made single women invisible. But this wasn't about pretending anymore. This was about reclaiming space. I nodded. As we stepped onto the floor, I saw the way people looked at us. Eyes tracked our steps. My aunts whispered, My father tilted his head like he was recalibrating who I was. And Sebastian, he didn't let it shake him. He danced like he meant it, confident, present, easy. You're good at this, I said as we swayed. College ballroom class. He replied. My mother insisted, said I couldn't go through life stepping on people's toes. I smiled. Smart woman. She'd like you. He said, I already do. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. My mind was spinning, trying to balance the performance with the real feelings beginning to surface. During a break, we sat at the edge of the reception hall near the glass doors that led to the venue's garden. Sebastian glanced at the crowd and asked, You okay? I should feel worse. I admitted, but I don't. I feel seen. Good, he said, because from where I'm sitting, you're doing a hell of a job holding your own. I looked at him then, really looked, the way his posture was relaxed but alert, the way he didn't overdo it, the way he noticed the small details without making me feel examined. He wasn't saving me. He was standing beside me, quietly offering support without expectation. And for someone like me, someone who had spent a lifetime being measured by family standards I never asked for, that meant more than I could say could. What I didn't know was that the night was far from over, that beneath all this civility, suspicion was brewing, and Savannah. She wasn't done when dessert was served. Savannah made her move. She stood again with a flute of champagne, her second toast of the evening. Her voice rang out, sweet and syrupy, layered with a kind of fake humility only those trained in social charm could deliver. I just wanted to thank everyone again for coming, she began, eyes scanning the room like a pageant queen in search of applause. It means the world to us that you're here, especially family, especially those who made a real effort to be part of our day. Her gaze landed on me like a spotlight. She held the pause for just long enough. And of course, it's lovely to meet Mariah's new companion. The word companion came out coated in something sour. Sebastian raised his glass with a smile, calm and charming as ever. I could feel the eyes again, that creeping sensation that you're on display but not truly seen, a guest at the wrong table, a woman who didn't fit, and now may be lying about someone to make herself feel worth inviting. My mother laughed lightly. My father, seated 2 chairs away, gave a small cough like he wasn't sure what reaction was safest. I didn't respond. I wouldn't give her the performance she wanted. When the clapping stopped and the music resumed, I excused myself to the restroom. The hallway was quiet, cool marble, soft lighting, the faint echo of celebration from the other side of the doors. I stared at myself in the mirror, ran my fingers under my eyes to check for smudged mascara. My reflection stared back like a stranger I was still learning to respect. For so long, I had measured my worth against Savannah's shadow. Her wedding just lit it in harsher light. I heard the restroom door creak open, footsteps, then a voice. I knew you were hiding something. I turned. Monica, my cousin, not cruel, exactly, but always curious in that sharp-edged, competitive way. Excuse me, I said. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, red lipstick flawless. Your boyfriend, he's not who you say he is. I just ran into a friend who's at the Johnson wedding next door. They have a photographer's assistant named Sebastian, tall, dark hair, same suit. She described him exactly. I felt a cold tightening in my chest. Monica tilted her head. So who is he really? Mariah, and why the show? I tried to think of a response that wouldn't sound like a confession. He is who he says he is, I said evenly. And what exactly is it you think I'm trying to prove that you're not alone? She replied without hesitation. But you are. And you've always hated that. There was no point in arguing. Her mind was already made up. She walked out with a parting shot over her shoulder. I'm not the only one who'll notice. Back at the table, Sebastian was talking to my father about international investments. I watched him navigate the conversation with ease, throwing in just enough lingo to pass as someone from that world. He was good, too good, and suddenly I felt a rush of guilt. What had I dragged him into? What kind of person lets a stranger lie on her behalf just to survive a dinner? He must have seen something shift in my face, because when I sat down, he leaned closer. Everything all right? No, I said quietly. My cousin made the connection. Someone from the other wedding saw you. Word's going to spread. He gave a small nod. I figured this wouldn't last the whole night. You should leave, I said, before this becomes worse for you, and let them humiliate you all over again, he asked. Not happening. I wanted to protest, to tell him he didn't owe me this, but his voice wasn't loud or performative. It was steady, clear. He wasn't doing this to be the hero in a wedding drama. He was doing it because he understood something deeper, what it meant to be made small by the people who should have lifted you up. I looked around the room and saw the familiar choreography of family dynamics, the pecking order, the whispers, the smug superiority of people who believed their way was the only way to be right. That was when Savannah approached again, this time with her husband Tyler by her side. She smiled, wide and glossy for the crowd, but her voice was edged with frost. Mariah, she said, mind joining me for a moment? I stood. Tyler nodded politely. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Savannah led me toward a side alcove, out of earshot, but still within view. She waited until we were alone before speaking. You really think this is okay? She asked. Bringing a stranger here, pretending, lying to everyone. You've been lying to everyone your whole life, I said, surprised by my own boldness, smiling like you care, when you don't, performing niceness while cutting people down behind their backs. Don't talk to me about pretending. She blinked, clearly caught off guard. I didn't make you feel that way. You made me feel invisible. I said, for years. And when I showed up alone, you made sure everyone noticed. You wanted to embarrass me. That wasn't about love. That was about control. Savannah's mask slipped for a second, a flicker of something real. Then it hardened again. Fine, she said. Play your game. But when it all unravels, don't expect anyone to feel sorry for you. As she walked away, I stood there, feeling more clear-headed than I had in weeks. Something inside me had shifted. This wasn't about one night. It wasn't about a fake date or a wedding toast. It was about years of being told I was less, of shrinking myself to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. Sebastian found me 5 minutes later near the back exit. We can leave if you want, he said. We've done more than enough pretending for one night. I looked at him, really looked, not as a stranger, not as a prop, but as a man who, in his own way, had reminded me I was allowed to take up space. Not yet. I said, let's stay. I think I've got one more thing to say. The silence fell fast. Monica had done exactly what she promised. Within 10 minutes of our conversation, Savannah was standing in the center of the dance floor, flanked by Monica and 2 of her bridesmaids, her wedding dress glowing under the chandeliers like a stage costume waiting for its next line. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her voice was high and clipped as she raised her hand, pointing across the room like a prosecutor ready to make her closing statement. You, she said, you're not Mariah's boyfriend. You work at the wedding next door. You're a complete stranger who crashed my wedding. The music cut, the DJ, sensing drama, fumbled to lower the volume. Conversations halted like someone had pulled a plug. Guests turned to watch. not even trying to look discreet. Wine glasses paused midair. Forks froze above plates. In that moment, I could hear the thud of my own heart louder than anything else in the room. Sebastian stood beside me, his body still, his expression unreadable. I could see his jaw tense for just a second. Then he stepped forward. "I can explain," he said, his tone calm, measured. Savannah didn't wait. She spun toward me. "And you," she continued, her voice louder now. "You brought a stranger here, lied to all of us. What is wrong with you, Mariah?" My cheeks burned. The shame wasn't just personal. It was communal. It stretched across tables and seating charts and floral arrangements. My parents pushed through the crowd, their faces pale with confusion. "What's going on?" my father asked. "Mariah's boyfriend is a fraud," Savannah said. "She's so desperate to impress everyone that she convinced a complete stranger to pretend to love her." The words hit harder than I expected, not because they weren't partly true, but because they were said with such ease, such casual cruelty, as if she'd been waiting to weaponize that sentence all night. I glanced around the room and saw it pity, judgment, smug satisfaction flickering across familiar faces. Aunt Teresa shaking her head, Uncle George frowning deeply. Even my mother looked like someone had knocked the air out of her chest. And that was the moment I realized something. They didn't see me, not the real me. They saw an idea they'd created, and they were angry I didn't conform to it, not because I lied, but because I didn't stay in the role they'd written for me. Sebastian looked at me, waiting for a cue. I could tell he was ready to speak up, ready to take the fall if needed, but I shook my head. This was my mess, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to let someone else speak for me. I took a step forward. The room was still. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "It's true." The silence deepened, as if the chandeliers themselves had leaned in. Sebastian is a photographer's assistant at the Johnson wedding next door. We met today. He saw what was happening when I walked in alone and decided to help. He didn't ask for anything. I didn't pay him. He just saw a woman being humiliated by her own family and stepped in. Gasps, murmurs. But I kept going. But that's not the real story, is it? I turned toward my parents. The real story is that for years, I've been told that who I am isn't enough, that because I'm not married, because I don't have children, because I don't bake casseroles or decorate tablescapes, I'm somehow less. My mother opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Let me finish. I looked at Savannah. You've always played the perfect daughter, the one who follows the rules, who does everything right, and I don't begrudge you that. What I resent is that you used it as a weapon. Every time I stepped out of the mold, you made sure everyone noticed, like tonight. You couldn't just let me sit quietly and celebrate you. You had to point out that I was alone, and then laugh. You made me the punchline at your own wedding. Savannah flushed. This was supposed to be my day. It still is, I said, keeping my voice calm. But weddings don't excuse cruelty, and being family doesn't excuse humiliation. I turned to face the room. Sebastian helped me tonight. Yes, but the lie wasn't just mine. The real lie is that this family only sees value in women who are partnered, who fit neatly into a box, who make their lives small enough to be palatable. I caught my breath, steadying it before it cracked. Well, I'm not small, and I won't apologize for living differently. It was quiet, not the awkward kind, but the kind that came after something real, the kind that made people shift in their seats. Sebastian stepped forward then, his voice quiet but resolute. For what it's worth, he said. I've worked a lot of weddings. I've seen families who love each other, and I've seen families who keep score. And tonight, I saw someone stand tall in a room that tried to make her feel small. That's not desperation. That's strength. My mother looked stunned. My father was unreadable. Savannah stared, her lips tight. "You need to leave," she said to me, her voice cold. "Before I have someone escort you out." I nodded slowly. "Fine. Congratulations on your marriage. I hope it brings you the happiness you think you deserve." Then I turned to Sebastian. "Shall we?" He offered his arm without hesitation, and we walked together through the parted crowd. No one tried to stop us. No one moved. The room was still stuck in its own stunned silence. Each step toward the exit felt lighter, like I was shedding something I didn't know I'd been carrying for decades. The night air outside was cool and sharp. For a moment, we stood at the top of the steps, just breathing. Sebastian looked over at me. "You all right?" "Better than I expected," I said. "Lighter." "You were incredible," he said. "I've seen brides cry over seating charts. You walked through fire without blinking." I laughed then, the kind of laugh that comes after truth has been spoken and shame has been burned clean. "Let's get out of here," I said, "preferably somewhere with pancakes." And just like that, I left the wedding not with a broken heart, but with something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The diner was almost empty, the kind of place that felt like a safe harbor at 11 p.m. plastic booths, overworked waitresses, and the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the corners. I slid into a booth near the window while Sebastian ordered for both of us at the counter. I stared at the napkin holder, trying to process the fact that just hours ago, I'd walked into a wedding as the family joke, and now I was sitting here, stripped of their approval, but somehow more at peace than I'd felt in years. Sebastian returned with 2 mugs of coffee and a calmness that was strangely grounding. "You sure you're okay?" he asked as he slid into the seat across from me. "Honestly," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug, "I think I'm in shock. Not from what happened, from how good it feels to finally say what I meant without flinching." He nodded. "It was brave. It was overdue." I said, "Years of swallowing my tongue, minimizing my opinions, downplaying my wins just to avoid being too much for them. I think I finally hit the limit." We paused as the waitress arrived with a tired smile and a plate of chocolate chip pancakes for me. Denver omelet for him. Anything else? "Sugar," she asked. "Maybe just validation." I muttered. She winked. "You'll find it in the syrup." I smiled in spite of myself, over bites of warm food. Sebastian and I let the fake history we'd invented melt away and slowly replaced it with something real. I told him about my job, how I'd fought tooth and nail to get to senior creative strategist at my firm, only to have my own mother tell people I worked on social media. He told me about growing up in Chicago with parents who still referred to photography as his little hobby. I laughed when he mimicked his dad's deep voice asking, "So when are you going to get a real job?" It hit too close to home to be anything but hilarious. For the first time that day, I wasn't defending my life or explaining it. I was just living it, out loud, without apology. That kind of clarity is rare. It doesn't come from meditation or podcasts. It comes from moments when you are broken open and choose not to glue yourself back into the shape that made others comfortable. "You know what's funny?" I said as I sipped my coffee. "They'll probably go home tonight and say I ruined her wedding." Sebastian looked up. "You didn't ruin anything. You just refused to play a role that wasn't yours. If anything, you set the record straight." "Yeah," I said, "but I've learned families like mine don't really want the truth. They want the appearance of harmony, even if it means pretending." I just shattered their illusion. He studied me for a moment, then said something I hadn't expected. "Sometimes breaking the illusion is the most loving thing you can do. because it gives people a chance to stop living in it too. I didn't say anything right away, just stared at the swirling cream in my coffee. The idea that telling the truth could be a kind of generosity and invitation, not just a rebellion, hit deeper than I anticipated. We lingered until the diner started flipping chairs onto tables and dimming lights. I didn't want the night to end, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, and real had become rare in my world. As we stood up to leave, I reached for my wallet, but Sebastian waved it off. "This one's on me." He said, "You already paid for tonight with grace." Outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. He walked me to my car, and we stood there for a beat, neither of us quite ready to part. "Thank you," I said, "for showing up, literally and figuratively. You did the hard part." He replied, "I just walked through the door and said 7 words. "Well," I said with a small smile, "those 7 words shifted the entire tone of my life. Then maybe they weren't just words." He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "Would it be completely off-brand if I gave you my real number?" I laughed. "You mean, not the imaginary one where we pretend to live in a loft and argue about jazz? That one was solid," he said, smiling. "But yeah, the real one, just in case you ever need a fake boyfriend again." I took his phone, typed in my number, and saved it under Mariah, no pretending required. He did the same. As I turned to get in my car, he added quietly, "By the way, I wasn't pretending when I said I like you." I paused, looked over my shoulder. Then maybe we should see what happens when nothing's pretend. Driving home, I expected the crash of emotion to hit me, the regret, the self-doubt, the anxiety over the fallout that would surely come. But none of it came. Instead, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself in years. Stillness, not the kind born from defeat, the kind born from a decision to stop chasing someone else's version of success. When I got home, I turned off my phone without checking the dozens of texts and missed calls I knew were waiting. I needed one night to sleep without noise, without performing, without managing anyone else's expectations. For the first time in a long time, I slept with the window open, the sound of distant city life humming like a lullaby I didn't know I missed. The next morning, the light in my apartment felt different, warmer, less filtered. My inbox was full, mostly from relatives who had witnessed the scene at the wedding. Some messages were sharp, veiled in concern, but edged with judgment. Others surprised me. A text from Aunt Teresa that simply read, "You said what needed saying." An email from Uncle George, "I owe you an apology." Been blind to how the family treats you. Even a message from Cousin Madison I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. "Wish I had your courage last year at my mom's birthday dinner." I didn't reply to anyone right away, not because I was punishing them, but because I was choosing myself. I'd spent years responding, explaining, smoothing things over. This time, I was letting silence do the talking. Sometimes, silence says I'm not available for your version of me anymore. It's strange how fast people adjust when you stop playing the role they've assigned you. For the first 2 days after the wedding, the messages trickled in, some accusing, others awkwardly supportive. Then they tapered off, like a storm that didn't know where else to rain. I didn't reach out. I didn't defend. I didn't apologize. I simply went on with my life. I woke up, made coffee, answered work emails, and designed campaign mock-ups for a tech startup run by 2 Gen Z founders who couldn't care less about my marital status. It was liberating, not dramatic, not defiant, just mine. The strange part wasn't how quiet my family got. It was how quiet my own mind became. For years, my thoughts had been loud with comparison, with invisible checklists I never wrote but always carried. When are you going to settle down? When are you going to stop acting like your job matters more than your future? When are you going to realize you're not 25 anymore? The questions had always been there, not just from others, but from inside me. The voice I'd internalized so deeply I couldn't distinguish it from my own. But now, for the first time, that voice wasn't shouting. It was barely whispering. That week, I went back to my regular rhythm. Monday morning meetings, sketch reviews, late night edits with lo-fi beats in the background, and in that quiet, something new started to grow. Not confidence, not yet. Something simpler, clarity. I met Sebastian again the following Friday. No pretense this time, no fake backstory. Just two people who had been thrown into the same fire and found a kind of strange solidarity inside it. We chose a cafe downtown, one with terrible parking and excellent pastries. He was already there when I arrived, seated at a patio table with 2 coffees and a knowing smile. "You're early," I said as I sat down. "So are you," he replied. Guess neither of us liked waiting anymore. We talked, really talked, not about family drama or the wedding, but about art, about failure, about how it feels to pour your soul into something and watch someone else get the credit, about how exhausting it is to be the weird one in a room full of people who think conventional means better. Sebastian told me about a portfolio review where a gallery owner said his work was too raw to be marketable. I told him about the client who loved my designs, but asked if a male lead could pitch them to keep the tone strong. We laughed, but it wasn't bitter. It was the laugh of people who had stopped waiting for permission. As we shared a second cup of coffee, he looked at me and said, "You ever think maybe you're not hard to love? Maybe you've just been surrounded by people who don't know how to recognize real depth when they see it." It hit me harder than I wanted to admit, because deep down, I'd always suspected the problem was me, that if I were just a little less ambitious, a little more agreeable, a little quieter, maybe I'd finally be enough. But Sebastian said it without hesitation, like it wasn't a compliment, just a fact. That night, I opened an old folder on my computer. Inside were design concepts I'd never shown anyone, personal pieces, some strange, some bold, all honest. I'd always been afraid they were too off-brand, too emotional, too me. But now, I started uploading them onto a private Behance page. No likes, no shares, no expectations. Just proof for myself that I wasn't hiding anymore. Days passed. I didn't hear from Savannah, not a text, not an apology. I didn't expect one, for someone like her. Silence was power, control. But this time, it didn't work because I wasn't reaching anymore. I wasn't performing worth. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. What I did hear, though, surprised me. Cousin Madison invited me to her book launch. She'd self-published a collection of poetry and wanted me to design the promotional visuals. Aunt Teresa sent a voice note, a shaky one, saying, "I never told you this, but I always admired how you didn't care what anyone thought. I wish I had that when I was your age. Even my dad, who usually avoided confrontation like it was contagious, left a voicemail, no apology, just, 'Heard you're working on a new campaign. Send me the link. I'd like to see it.' It wasn't redemption, but it was a shift. And that's how healing starts sometimes. Not with grand gestures, but with small movements in the dark, unseen roots growing under cold ground. At work, something shifted too. I stopped playing safe. I pitched wilder ideas, bolder language. I stopped filtering myself through the lens of what would make the client feel comfortable and started asking, what would make people feel seen? And the wild part, it worked. One of my ideas, an interactive storytelling campaign for a women-led tech brand, got shortlisted for a national award. My boss called me into her office and said, "This is the most you I've ever seen your work. It's like you stopped editing yourself." I smiled. Maybe I did. The truth was, I'd been editing myself my entire life, not just at work, at home, in relationships, even in front of mirrors. But once you've walked out of a room where everyone expected you to beg for acceptance and you didn't, you stop asking for approval in quieter ways too. That weekend, Sebastian invited me to a small gallery pop-up he was part of. The theme was identity in transition, fitting. His photo series was raw and beautiful. Strangers caught mid-movement, faces half-lit, emotions unresolved. I stood in front of one piece, an older woman staring defiantly into the lens, every wrinkle sharp with story, and felt something rise in my chest. Pride, maybe, or recognition. "Her name's Gloria," Sebastian said. "Coming up beside me," she told me. "I've lived too long to smile for people I don't trust." I laughed softly. She and I would get along. He looked at me then, not as the woman from the wedding, but as the woman I'd grown into since. "You're changing," he said, "not into someone else, just more into yourself." I nodded. Took long enough. What I didn't know then was that change had a ripple effect, and just as I was finding my center, the cracks I'd left behind at that wedding were beginning to spread through the Harper family, because when one woman stops pretending, it forces everyone around her to look at the parts of themselves they've been avoiding. And some people don't take that well. The ripple effect didn't come all at once. It unfolded slowly, like light seeping under a closed door. The first shift came in the form of an email from my mother. No grand apology, no paragraphs, just 1.5 lines. "Your words hurt me, but maybe I needed to be hurt. Let's talk when you're ready." I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't racing to repair what I hadn't broken. I let the silence speak for me. A few days later, I received an unexpected message from Clara Kim, a woman I used to work with, one who made a habit of undermining my ideas in meetings, only to repackage them as her own. Her email was crisp, polite, and oddly sincere. "I saw your name on the credits for the West Grove campaign. You were always ahead of the curve, even when some of us couldn't see it. I've recommended you to a client I think would benefit from your style." I sat with that message longer than I'd like to admit, wondering whether it was a delayed act of recognition or simply an easy way to clear her conscience. Either way, I didn't respond because I wasn't desperate for acknowledgement anymore, especially not from people who only knew how to validate you once the room had already shifted in your favor. It was around this time that Savannah called. I was walking back from the grocery store, earbuds in, balancing a paper bag against my hip, when her name flashed across the screen. I stood on the corner of my block, thumb hovering over the decline button, before answering. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then, "I thought you'd block me." I exhaled. "I thought you'd never call." She didn't launch into excuses, didn't try to soften the past. What she said instead caught me off guard. I watched the video, the one Madison filmed. It went around the family group chat. They didn't know I was in the frame until later. My stomach tightened. I didn't need her to describe it. I knew what they saw me standing alone, then speaking up, then walking out with more dignity than they expected. "What did they say?" I asked. "Depends," she replied. "Aunt Helen said you embarrassed yourself. Some cousins said you were disrespectful, but Uncle George told everyone he wished he had half your courage. I didn't know what to do with that, so I asked the one thing that mattered. And what did you think? Her voice faltered. I thought you looked free, and I hated that, because I'm not. I sat on a bench outside a bakery and felt the edges of something old crack open. She continued. I followed every rule, did everything they asked, married the man they approved, planned the wedding Mom wanted, and now Tyler and I aren't even speaking. We argued through our entire honeymoon. I waited. Why are you telling me this? Because, she said quietly, you're the only one who ever told the truth, even when it made people uncomfortable, and I think I need some of that. Her honesty didn't undo everything, but it made the silence between us less sharp. It didn't bridge the years of comparison, but it opened a door neither of us had known how to knock on before. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my door without warning. She had a container of chicken soup in one hand and a look of unease in the other. I opened the door in sweatpants and an old hoodie. No makeup, hair unbrushed. Her eyes flicked briefly to my face, and for once, I didn't shrink under her gaze. I didn't tuck away my real self. Can I come in? She asked. I didn't answer with words. I just stepped aside. We sat in silence at the kitchen counter while I made tea. She didn't touch the soup she brought. I didn't ask why. Then, finally, she spoke. I was raised to believe a woman's worth came from who chose her, a husband, a child, a household. I passed that belief to you without thinking, and I think it hurt both of us. I stirred honey into her mug. It did. I didn't realize it until that night. When you said what you said, she didn't cry. Neither did I. But something shifted, something unspoken. I'm still learning, she added. Still unlearning, I guess. Me too, I said. And I'm not doing it for anyone else this time. We didn't resolve everything that night. We didn't hug and declare a new beginning, but we stopped pretending, and that was new. That was enough. That same week, I started sleeping better. Not longer, just deeper. I stopped checking my phone for missed calls from people who only remembered me when they needed a body in a family photo. I stopped scanning Instagram for signs that I was lagging behind some imaginary finish line. I started designing a series of prints based on unspoken feelings. Not for a client, not for a paycheck, just because I could, just because they were mine. And when Sebastian texted, asking if I wanted to help him plan his next gallery set, I said yes, not because I needed the collaboration, but because working with someone who didn't need to diminish me to shine felt like an act of self-respect. That month, the sky over Seattle was unusually clear. Mornings came soft and quiet, and for the first time in years, I woke up without guilt, without performance, without asking, who do I need to be today? Because I had finally found the answer, myself. 3 weeks after the wedding, Savannah hosted a small dinner at our parents' house to celebrate her new job. It was supposed to be low-key, just family. According to the group text, I wasn't planning to go. I'd deleted that thread the night of the wedding and hadn't looked back. But then, the invitation arrived by mail, handwritten, no frills. Just my name, the date, and a quiet postscript if you come. Come as you are. That last line did something strange to me. I didn't read it as a peace offering. I read it as a test, or maybe a door left half open. For years, I would have taken that as a signal to ask, to check, to seek confirmation. But now, I didn't ask anyone's permission. I chose. The day of the dinner, I wore black, not to mourn, but to neutralize. Sleek trousers, a cropped turtleneck, a structured blazer, no lipstick, no earrings, my hair in a clean bun. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to be present. When I arrived, the house was already full. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, the sound of glasses clinking. Someone was telling a loud story in the dining room, probably Uncle Jeff. I stepped inside and waited for the usual moment where someone would point out how long it had been, how I finally showed up, but no one did. People glanced, paused, then went back to their conversations. I moved quietly through the space, nodded at the ones who nodded back, and poured myself a drink. Not to cope, just to mark that I was choosing to be here, on my terms. Savannah spotted me from across the room and walked over. Her smile wasn't forced, but it wasn't relaxed either. "You came," she said. "You invited me." I replied. She gestured toward the hallway. "Do you want to talk?" "No need," I said evenly. "Not tonight. Just let me be part of the room." She seemed surprised, maybe even relieved. Okay. Dinner was served in courses. Our father, as usual, tried to narrate every dish as if it were a Food Network segment. Our mother kept refilling everyone's wine glass before they were halfway done. I sat next to Cousin Ava, who whispered, "I saw that video twice. You were right. I wish I had your voice." I didn't reply, because this wasn't about reliving the moment. It was about moving through the space I was once erased from without asking to be seen, yet refusing to be invisible. What struck me wasn't how different everyone acted. It was how differently I perceived it. The same people, the same stories, but without the old ache of trying to belong. Everything felt lighter, detached, but not numb, just centered, midway through dessert. Our mother raised a toast. Her words were polished as always, but this time there was a tremble beneath the surface, to new chapters, honest voices, and the women in this family who teach us how to be braver even when we don't want to learn. She didn't look at me when she said it, but she didn't have to. The room was quiet just long enough for everyone to realize what wasn't being said aloud and who it was meant for. After the dinner, I helped gather the empty plates, not because I was expected to, but because I wanted my hands to be busy. Savannah joined me in the kitchen for a few moments. We worked side by side, in silence, passing dishes like a well-practiced rhythm. Then softly, she said, "You changed the air in that room tonight." I didn't answer, just rinsed a glass and placed it in the rack. "You didn't have to come," she added, "but I'm glad you did." I dried my hands, looked at her, and said, "I didn't come back for you, or them. I came back to remind myself I was never the one who needed fixing." I left before anyone could ask me to stay longer. The cool air outside felt good, like truth against the skin. As I walked to my car, I saw our father on the porch, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. He didn't say much, just handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo me at 7 years old, covered in mud, grinning with 2 missing teeth, holding up a science trophy. On the back, in his handwriting, "You've always been the one with vision. I just didn't know how to name it. No apology, just acknowledgement. And sometimes that's enough to begin again." That night, I slept without waking once. No mental rehearsals of what I could have said. No emotional hangover. Just quiet. Not the kind that follows an argument, but the kind that follows alignment. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started sketching a new concept, one I'd shelved years ago because I thought no brand would be brave enough to use it. Now, I was designing it for myself. No deadline, no pitch, just truth. Because when you stop designing your life to be digestible to others, you finally make space for something real to emerge. And maybe that's the real comeback. Not the applause, not the redemption arc they can gossip about, but the quiet return to your own skin, unapologetic, unpolished, and utterly whole, a month after the dinner. The Harper family group chat was quieter than usual. No drama, No updates, no forwarded memes, just long gaps of silence punctuated by the occasional birthday reminder. I wasn't in the group anymore. I hadn't been re-added, and I didn't ask. But I heard things, not because I went looking, but because people started telling me. Cousin Ava reached out to ask if I could design the cover for her upcoming book on women in leadership. I want it to feel unapologetically real. She said, "Like your voice at the wedding, Uncle George sent me a LinkedIn message asking if I would be willing to speak at a community business event he was organizing. The way you handled that room, people need to learn how to stand in truth like that." Even Madison, the cousin who once rolled her eyes every time I spoke about my creative work, forwarded me a brand collaboration opportunity she'd passed on herself. "I think it fits you better than it fits me." She wrote. That small sentence stuck with me, not because it was flattering, but because it was new. For the first time, someone in that family had acknowledged that I didn't need to adjust to fit in. That, maybe. They were the ones who needed to make space. Meanwhile, things in my professional world began to shift. The storytelling campaign I had designed rooted in quiet resistance, emotional honesty, and female autonomy went viral. Not the kind of viral that breaks the internet, but the kind that lingers, shared between women in boardrooms, on group chats between friends who'd been underestimated, who'd been told they were too much or not enough. Emails poured in from people I didn't know. Some were founders, some were teachers, some were daughters who had left home years ago with silence as their only armor. They said, "Thank you for giving shape to what we never had the words for." My inbox became a mirror, not one that showed me my past, but one that reflected the woman I had finally grown into. Strong, clear, whole. Sebastian and I kept working together. His gallery installation was gaining traction, and he asked me to co-curate a follow-up exhibition, Unsaid. We met every Thursday night in a studio with bad lighting and cheap coffee, sorting through photographs and audio clips of strangers who had recorded their hardest truths. One night, after hours of edits, he looked over and said, "You know, there was a time I thought healing meant being louder than the people who silenced me. Now I think it just means living so well. They can't rewrite you." I smiled. Exactly, not winning their game, walking away from it altogether. We didn't talk about the wedding anymore. Not directly, but sometimes. We'd joke about writing a short film called The Speech and casting a bunch of actresses who never got to finish their own real-life monologues. Not for revenge, just for closure. At home, I redecorated my apartment, took down the framed degrees I'd once hung out of obligation, and replaced them with concept sketches that never made it to production. They weren't polished, they weren't commercial, but they were mine. I lit candles that smelled like pine and burnt sugar. I started journaling again, not to process pain, but to map ideas unfiltered, unapproved, unsellable, things that weren't meant to be anything but honest. Then came the call from Tyler, Savannah's husband or ex-husband. I wasn't sure anymore. He left a voicemail I replayed 3 times before deleting it. He said he was sorry, not for what happened at the wedding, but for everything before. "You were right," he said, about how some families protect appearances more than people. I never called back, not because I was angry, but because some bridges don't need to be walked across again. Some just need to be acknowledged and left alone. A few days later, Savannah messaged me, this time not with guilt or apology, just a photo of her in an airport, no makeup, hoodie on, suitcase by her feet. The caption read, "Headed somewhere new, alone, but not empty, I wrote back. You were always more capable than they let you believe. Her reply came instantly. You too. I printed that exchange, not to keep score, but to remind myself that even the ones who once made us feel small can find their own way out if they're willing to face the mirror. And if they're not, that's no longer my responsibility. That week, I pitched a new series to my agency, a digital anthology titled Last Words We Never Said. It featured anonymous stories from people who had walked out of relationships, jobs, families, and narratives that didn't belong to them. Stories of quiet exits, of loud goodbyes, of silences that roared. My boss hesitated at first. It's not flashy, not commercial. But then she paused. But maybe it's time we stop chasing what's safe and start amplifying what's real. And just like that, it got greenlit. I stood in my office, watching the city lights blink through the window, and realized this was it. Not a climax, not a triumph, just a return to myself, on my terms, without negotiation. Because healing doesn't always look like victory laps. Sometimes it looks like stability. Sometimes it sounds like your own voice in a room where no one's interrupting. And sometimes it feels like sipping tea in silence, knowing you didn't just survive what tried to erase you, you redefined yourself after it. The last thing I expected was to feel at peace, but that's exactly what settled in. Not because everything had resolved, but because I had stopped needing it to. A month after the anthology launched, I found myself standing in the center of a gallery exhibit in downtown Seattle, surrounded by work I once believed was too raw, too personal, too unpolished to show. The space wasn't crowded. The lighting was soft, intentional. The theme of the exhibit was titled Ghosts We Carry, and the curator had chosen my visuals for the opening section, blurred motion portraits of women mid-step, as if they were walking out of their own stories, shedding titles, roles, expectations. People drifted past the work slowly, reverently. Some paused long enough to read the small placards beneath each image, where I'd placed anonymous quotes pulled from submissions to last words we never said. One read, "They called me difficult. I called myself done." Another, she told me I'd regret leaving. She was wrong. I stood off to the side, watching strangers interact with something I'd once hidden. It didn't feel like exposure. It felt like truth finally breathing. That night, I didn't go home to check messages or track metrics. I didn't open the Harper family group chat, still muted, still distant. Instead, I walked through the city like I belonged to it, like I wasn't waiting for permission to feel full. There was no grand closure, no moment of triumph that came with music swelling in the background, just the gentle clarity of living a life no longer shaped by who I used to appease. When I reached my apartment, I found an envelope under the door again. This time, no handwriting, just a printed card inside that read, "You are not a story waiting to be redeemed. You are a story already unfolding." I didn't know who sent it, and for the first time, I didn't care, because it didn't feel like a message from someone trying to reach me. It felt like a message I'd finally accepted as mine. The next morning, I got a call from Savannah. Her voice was steady, not rehearsed, just real. She said, "I watched your gallery interview. The way you talked about walking away without anger, I didn't understand that before. I think I do now." I listened without interruption. She continued, "Tyler and I filed the divorce papers. I kept trying to prove I was worth staying for. Now I realize I was always worth walking away for. I didn't offer advice. I didn't say I told you so. I just said, I'm proud of you. And I meant it, because healing is not a contest, and growth doesn't require comparison." We ended the call with no promises, no resolutions, just two women finally speaking without needing to be right. That afternoon, I turned down another family event, a cousin's engagement party. Savannah said they'd been more polite lately. More careful, I said. Politeness is not transformation. She laughed quietly. Fair enough. I spent the evening watering my plants, sketching new concepts, sipping tea with lemongrass and ginger. Simple things, grounding things, the kinds of rituals that don't look like rebellion but are, because living gently in a world that tried to harden you is its own quiet revolt. The campaign for Last Words. We Never Said was picked up for a national feature. The agency offered me a seat on the executive strategy board. I didn't say yes out of pride. I said yes because I knew I could bring more of this into rooms that still thought emotion was a liability. My first move wasn't to celebrate. It was to recommend 3 junior creatives who had been overlooked for years, the ones with strange portfolios and soft voices, the ones who reminded me of who I used to be. I called it my quiet hiring revolution. No press release, no pat on the back, just doors opening without noise. Weeks later, I received a formal letter from my parents, handwritten, thoughtful, honest. My mother wrote, "You were never the disappointment. We just didn't know how to recognize a daughter who refused to play small." My father added, "If I could go back, I would ask you about your art instead of your resume." I didn't cry. I didn't frame it. I folded it neatly and placed it inside the same journal where I'd written my first draft of the speech I gave at the wedding. The same one that made the room fall quiet, full circle, not because they understood now, but because I no longer needed them to. The final moment came when I walked into a workshop I'd been invited to lead for young women in creative tech. The sign on the door read, "Designing from Truth." I stepped in and saw 20 women looking up, notebooks open, eyes full of questions. I told them, "You don't need a permission slip to be whole. You don't need applause to be real. You just need to stop editing yourself into something smaller." One of them raised her hand and asked, "But what if they freeze when you finally speak?" I smiled and said, "Then let them freeze. That's not your temperature to manage." Because in the end, that's what this story became. Not a revenge tale, not a rise and shine spectacle, but a quiet revolution made of choices, of stillness, of walking into rooms alone, not to prove a point, but because you no longer needed to be invited to take up space. And when that stranger walked in behind me at the wedding, not to validate, not to save, but simply to witness, I realized something. That wasn't a twist. That was a mirror, a reflection of who I had finally become. So the next time they laugh when you walk in alone, the next time they wait for you to shrink, the next time they whisper that you were never the favorite, remember this: you were never the problem. You were just the first one brave enough to stop pretending. And maybe, just maybe, the story doesn't end with you being welcomed back. Maybe it begins when you stop asking to be